I'm Annie Howe, and you're listening to The Truth in This Art podcast, hosted by Rob Lee.
And welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. And today I have the privilege of being in conversation with an interdisciplinary artist and curator whose work encompasses painting, sculpture, and photography. Please welcome James Williams II. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Rob, how you doing?
I'm here. I'm around. I'm doing well. How are you today?
I'm doing good, and thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I see you got the analog over there. I appreciate that. Shout out to you. So as we start off, I'm going to start peppering you with conversations because, we have topics, we have news and stuff to talk about a little bit towards the end. But I want to start off with kind of introductory sort of stuff. Could you share, some of your early influences and how your life upbringing influenced your current body of work?
It's been a mixture of things that has influenced my work, specifically the work I'm doing right now. But I would say the current work right now has been influenced with, I think, the kind of conversations that I have received as a kid from my mom regarding race, regarding society, and how one begins to navigate through that society, knowing your race. But these are not conversations, that are universal. These are more personal conversations. And these are conversations that, for me, that I'm sharing with my oldest. And so kind of carrying that I hate to say legacy because it's not really a legacy, but this kind of part of survival, per se, or at least understanding of something that makes no sense whatsoever in theory. And I, be honest, it wasn't till my daughter told me and it made no sense that I understood that it made no sense. And, you knew it at some point, but the complexities of it begins to get more ingrained into you as you get older, and you begin to just accept it to some degree. So, there's influence there regarding the relationships of me as a parent, but also me when I was a child, and was also trying to navigate when I was her age. I have two daughters. My oldest is named Indigo, and my youngest is named Zoe. Her full name is Zoel. And so, when I make work, I'm kind of thinking about multiple ways of approaching this work, that it's not necessarily just like, another parent making art and talking about parenting, but really just something that I think anyone that was a child, anyone that, understands or is trying to understand this world can somehow grasp. There are a lot of artists I look up to for both materials, the way that they use materials in their work. There's a lot of artists I look up to as painters. I come from a traditional painting background. And then conceptually, there's a lot of painters I think about, or artists, I should say, I think about conceptually. So there's a lot of influences coming from a lot of different places. I've been making this work for a long time, so it's hard to narrow down to more specific, this is what pushed me here and this is what pushed me there. A lot of the time, there's kind of just an embracing of everything. Yeah. And pushing ideas that at the time doesn't make any sense, and then as I'm working them out, it becomes to be more familiar to something that I think reflects what I'm trying to get across.
Thank you. And I think multiple things are baked into it. It's not like we have one seminal experience. We have 1 week. It's like if you've been doing something for a long time, and I think those past experiences, that past work isn't a complete departure. I think it's in part something that gets you to where you are now, unless you completely unlearn what it is to be an artist, what it means to make work or what have you. Then it's like, oh yeah, sure. I started off by this one crappy experience at like a Panera Bread, and this is what inspired this work. But like, no, it's like several things that are baked up that leads to a certain point, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I went to grad school at MICA, Maryland Institute College of Art, and in learning or at least going through the graduate experience, I had came from that more educated, and I saw the world in that way. It wasn't until I got to being a parent, or actually maybe earlier than that, honestly, that I realized having that education didn't necessarily make me more understanding. There's a certain sense that you can have knowledge, but you not have wisdom. And if you don't have wisdom, then the knowledge means nothing. And so, a wise moment is when my daughters say certain things to me that, are simple, but you have to step back and think like, you make some good points there. And I've said this before to people. I think, I never want to get to a point where I'm so prideful or so egotistical or whatever that I'm not even listening to the smallest voice. You sometimes can be so thinking that you know it all that you can lose sight in certain things. So I do think you can get some wisdom from children. Yeah. And I do think that when my kids say things, I don't try to stop them or I think we've all had those moments either as parents or from our parents where they're to say just because, right? Like why? And then just because, and it's a kind of a weird moment where it's like the parents either know or they don't know, but they don't want to justify. They don't want to justify the conversation because you've asked. And I think it's a moment of exhaustion too. But I do think for me, it's a learning moment. And I think that's what I'm trying to do. I'm learning in the materials, but I'm also learning as a person, even at 40, from my daughters. And as I'm hoping that it's shown in the work, it can leave an opportunity for the viewer to learn something as well. That might be the case because I'm an educator, that I'm always trying to leave that kind of opportunity there. But, who knows?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's in there, I think when you talk about ego, you talk about, I know this, I'm quote unquote a master at this, I've been doing this X amount of years, when people lead and preface with that, I'm like, there's stuff that you've probably overlooked or you've forgotten or what have you because you know it. But I think being able to talk with someone who may not have the same amount of experience, like maybe a child, maybe someone that's getting, into a particular field, it's like, all right, they may ask questions. You're like, I never thought of that. You got a point. And being able to go back in it. And I've been trying to take this approach of trying to view things like a novice, that I can kind of pay attention to those details, those intermediary steps, because you can miss it. You can I look at it like this. You can have people like my dad's been driving for let's say 50 years, right? You can still miss an exit of a place you've gone to many a times.
Exactly. And I also don't want to overshadow the racial component of the work by saying that this is more of like a teaching, learning lesson. I think, as every person of color, specifically Black men and Black women, this world is changing so much, and we're coming across a lot of things. We're seeing things happen due to us being Black a lot differently, a lot rapidly, and some of it might even feel familiar to some of the older adults who have gone through civil rights movements and things like that. There's a lot going on, and I think where am I getting with this? Forgive me. I think for me, even when my daughter asks me a question, and I have had my personal experiences with it, I cannot claim understanding, even in some of the, you know what I mean? I might have gone through it once or twice, but I have to leave opportunity for her to not see the world so small, narrow that way. I think there's a lot of times where, when I started traveling overseas and going to different places, I thought I knew everything before then, or got a sense of understanding race. But then when you start going to Portugal or you go to Mexico or wherever, you begin to realize race is very different in other
Yes.
countries, and matter of fact, ethnicity plays such a major part than race. So there's a lot of things I didn't know, but I do think that contributes to a conversation with my daughter. So when I'm saying, hey, we need to go travel so you can see the world and see more about what, the superimposed identities that you may have other than what is perceived by you in Baltimore, Maryland.
Yeah.
It's, that's something else I'm trying to unlock or trying to talk about too. And I haven't got there yet in the work per se, but I'm trying to get that way in my daughter and the conversation I'm having with her.
Do you feel that, and this is just free jazzing at this point. So do you feel that in your work and maybe how you approach just asking questions, because that's the thing, like seeking answers, kind of seeking for understanding, seeking for alternative perspectives. And I like to try, that's why I'm asking this question as well, to see, hey, I know what this might look like in Baltimore. I know of an experience that's in Baltimore through what I've seen and what I've interacted with. But if I go to somewhere else, I would imagine it may be different. It could be better, it could be worse, whatever. So I go there, like with the series I was telling you about before we got started, I want to see what the arts and culture is like in Austin. Mm-hmm. So instead of me asking someone who's down there, I may take that into account, but I'd rather go down there and experience. I felt that was a richer experience instead of getting feedback and thinking I have a sense maybe based on a travel show or based on a Zoom chat or what have you, but to be able to go there and really be immersed in it, I think I got a different perspective in that. But that all comes from asking the question.
That's a good question. I used to make a lot of earlier work that people probably you probably can't find on Google or anything like that. But I made some work that I would say is equivalent to like what I think the conversation about race is now amongst artists. There's more of a universal kind of conversation, more historical conversation about slavery or civil rights movement, just really just the kind of, I think, the big heavy points about what it means to be a black man or black woman. When I started making this work, I had told myself that I had to be very careful. I love history, and I get historically, I think historically there's so much there, and I really enjoy going to it, but I found it troubling to have this type of work that I'm making when I'm talking about things like the black contract. There's something that was created, right? And we can talk about historically why it was created. And I understand why, to some degree, it was created. There are some nuances that I don't understand. But I'm not interested in, I think it's important for me to lay some ground rules when I'm making this work. And one of the major ground rules that I don't know if I share to many people is it has to be personal. It has to be something, an experience that I have had or has connected with, something that has happened within our family. Again, this is a conversation between me and my daughters that I'm opening up. And I did that intentionally too. I'm being very vulnerable in the work. Yeah. To share that part, to be vulnerable and share that to the audience is not very easy, I think. But what's also not very easy is to pick these moments and know that, one, it connects to a lot of people, or know, two, that it might not connect to many. I've seen the work in response to people that are not like you and I, now a black man. So I know that certain people are going to respond very different to that type of work. But I think one of the major parts of this rule is if I can talk about personal experience, then I don't find myself, I can be more cautious about how I go about the conversation. Yeah. If you start using more universal languages and ideas or stereotypical ideas about how this and this happens, then you find yourself in a different type of conversation where you have to defend it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have to kind of, well, let me back up. Even in the work, there's another rule I have, I don't put any white people or white construct connections into the work. I don't believe I need to.
Yeah.
To talk about the black construct, you're going to automatically talk about the white construct. And so really, I leave room for that to be there. There's always going to be a moment of adversity in some of the work.
Yeah.
And you just kind of automatically take in what you already know from that to fill in those gaps. There has to be some room for some ambiguity, but it also has to be specific in certain areas. And that specific part comes from more of the narrative base in the work.
Yeah.
There's much I can get into it, and I know you have a lot of questions, but I do think that's important for me to be mindful of how to tell this story.
Yeah.
And to bring it back to my daughters, that's where it becomes about, you brought up Texas and like going, like the part of that conversation where I would talk about going to another country would be somewhat of a smaller part to the bigger conversations. You know what I mean? Like, it's not more of like, after we have talked about all these things, now I want you to visit this, other countries or do these other things, but it's more of another conversation, it's not how am I saying this? Forgive me. After having COVID, my brain now is shot a little bit. Traveling is not the envelope of the whole grouping of everything, but it is just one additional conversation among all the other things. Yeah. And that part comes from my, again, personal experiences of traveling. And can what helped me begin to see things. For example, and then I'm going to kind of be quiet so we can get to the questions. But when I went to Mexico City with my wife a long time ago, it was the first time, and I shared this with people, and some people give me that look like, really? And then I have a few people that were like, oh, really? But anyways, when we went to Mexico City, it was the first time I didn't feel black. And I don't see, I have to be careful using that because there has to be beauty in being black. There has to be a certain love for being black. But I also have to acknowledge that it was a construct. At the same time, it wasn't. I didn't create being black. It was created by somebody that wanted to downplay myself and the many others like me. Yeah. Right? It's kind of melted all of these other ethnicities into one grouping based on our skin complexion. But when I went to Mexico City, I did not feel black. I did not cringe up when I was walking past cops. Yeah. There was a full alleyway of SWAT team. Members and I didn't cringe up. And, there's certain, things I do that I know I do in the United States as a sense of protection that I didn't do when I was in Mexico. I had let my guard down, which is something that I've been told never to do as a kid. It goes back to those talks you got from your parents. Don't let your guard down. I let my guard down in Mexico City and it felt relieving. And I never had felt that for the longest of my life.
I think that's why folks, when they go like traveling sometimes, that they come back feeling like relaxed because, you're able to kind of get past, like you may be in a place that you're familiar with or has similarities to a place that you're familiar with. And you're like, all right, this looks but if it's so different and you're able just to kind of just relax and just be able to exist without these other parameters. Mm-hmm. That's a great feeling. Mm-hmm. And like as you were describing it, I'm thinking of just, I've only been out of the country one time. And I mean, it was an island, it was a resort, but also, it was things I was familiar with. But, I'm not a shirt off on the beach kind of guy, but I was a shirt off on the beach kind of guy. And, it's just eating conch fritters, living life. I was like, oh, this is what the celebrities do. Great. Mm-hmm. This is wonderful.
Mm-hmm. If you think about it, if you go on like YouTube and you just type in something like black traveling or whatever, you'll find so many channels. There's a channel that I like. I don't even know why I even subscribe to it, but I'm always on it. But it's called something like Black Travelers in Japan or something like that.
I think I followed it.
Yeah. And it really is just trying. Its whole focus, or at least what I believe its focus is to remove any stigmas about traveling in Japan.
Yeah.
And, there has been conversations about, previous prime ministers, or not, I don't know if they're called prime ministers. What are they called? Whoever's running, forgive me for not knowing what that is, but, there has been comments before, about, how, really forgot what scenario
Yeah, it's
was.
a prime minister. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess he had said that he said that Japanese has a problem with prostitutes like the United States has problems with black people. I remember that quote, and it was very much like boom, right? And in my mind, I'm like, oh, Japanese is like, Japan is seeing it like that. But then when you look at this, watch this YouTube channel, they're trying to remove that idea that someone has said something stupid.
Yeah.
But there, and overall, our personal experience is boom, boom, boom. But the reality is, you don't see that with many other races or many other cultures. There is a need for that. And I do think that it's because there is a stigma for Black people to travel. Because out of fear, maybe, or out of this kind of sense of like, can I do this? And I do think that, many people in my family have never traveled out of the country. And, to be able to go out first time, I think it was right after grad school, it was so unique to me. And ever since then, I got caught with that like traveling bug and just wanted to keep traveling. So I don't know why I subscribe to that thing, but I love hearing the stories about people saying like, listen, it's amazing out here.
Yeah.
And as much as there are some people that are racist and there are some people that will look at you sideways, overall, this country they're not like that. And, I think those are great stories.
And I think to get that feedback, because, and now move to the next question after this, I think you hear about the xenophobia thing. And, that's just part of, I think it's a weird byproduct where because there's not much travel in and out, it's like, COVID numbers were relatively low because there wasn't much traveling in and out. Or even about the 2015 Miss Universe Japan with the Ariana Miyamoto, who's like, half Black, half Japanese. And that was a weird take. And it's just like, so who's Japanese? You start getting to those questions of identity and so on. And but I think having a channel of people who are living there and they look like me and you, or giving that other perspective. And I'd rather have a full holistic perspective potentially to kind of quench some of that curiosity that might influence me to go or to think about it in a different way versus purely this is a one-sided thing, because it can't always be that. It can't only be that.
Yeah.
So I want to move to this next question. So I read that your work includes artifacts from pop culture. So that's like comic books.
Yes. So that, I think I know where you're going to get at. So that's a older artist statement from another body of work that I did before. Matter of fact, since we were just talking about traveling, when I came back from Spain, I was in Spain for I think about a month. And when I was coming back from Spain, I had ended up learning more from my father, some parts of his childhood that I didn't know about. And my father, there was parts of my father that I wish he had. I guess I had high hopes in the sense of like what I thought my father would have been or should have been. And this is before I became a parent and knowing that, a lot more what I know now, but he had shared some things with me that made sense. It was like, oh, that's why you had gone through this. And that's why our relationship was like this. And so they made it very hard to get frustrated at him for not being this ideal person I imagined a father would look like. And so in response to that, I made a body of work called Little Rooster. And Little Rooster came about, honestly, through a mixture of research into his life, research into the time period that my father was born. My father's way over 80. So the time period that, he was going through, which had a lot to do with like earlier comic books and things like that. And so in that part of the art statement, when I was talking about comic books and artifacts and things like that, I was looking at all that stuff as kind of material per se to build up Little Rooster, this kind of narrative I've created. And the narrative is about this little boy who was mischievous, and my father very much was like that as well, and I think that's who I was like as a kid too. And he did have a strong relationship with his father, which my father did not. And I went into more of a with that body of work, I went into kind of a sci-fi, not sci-fi, but more like kind of like a nerdy. At the time, like comic books were really much diving into superheroes and this kind of like what if kind of moments. And I think that's what I was diving into. So, there's some fantasy in there, some sci-fi, I guess, in there, very small bits of it. But I was diving into all of that stuff. And at that time, you had, kind of, racist and homophobic comics, but they all very much were diving into some of the similar things. And then the war was happening, so there's this sense of empowerment that people were trying to put in comic books of like, we can fight this war if we had Superman, or we can fight this war.
Some propaganda.
There's a lot of propaganda. So, I was diving into all that stuff and trying to take a little bit of that stuff and put in there. And I was also, through that body of work, started doing more sculptural paintings. And that's what kind of propelled me into looking at the work I'm doing now. I think if it wasn't for that body of work, I wouldn't have been, I would say, courageous, maybe. It sounds weird to say that. It's not like I save the kid from a burning car, but like, you get a little afraid of trying something new. And when I was trying to connect these dots together, the thing that came to mind is like, well, I guess I'll just make it. I'll just make this sculpture version of it. So, I was making artifacts. I was making things, I would say, that are allowing the viewer to enter into this type of world that I created. I had made all these I literally made Little Rooster, the narrative, as if I was going to make a comic book. I drew out all the individuals I was going to put into this piece. And I honestly, talking about inspiration, a lot of people that inspired me was a good friend of mine, Lawrence Lee. I mean, him and I are good friends. We're still good friends. Lawrence Lee is an artist out in Texas, and him and Trenton Doyle Hancock are good friends. And so Trenton Doyle Hancock and Lawrence Lee both were doing a lot of narratives around very much their own kind of stories. And you can tell that a lot of them being taken from stories in the Bible and Christianity and things like that. And that probably is just because it was rooted, so heavily in Texas. But they had a point of where they're bringing the stories from. For me, it was from my father, and finding a way to create a new narrative for him that he, didn't have such a drastic and difficult life that he had. So, But that's that's a very long explanation, but that was a very old body of work. This is how
the deep dive goes, man. I'm out here. I'm out here looking through everything.
I can only imagine what you found.
I'd asked someone recently, I was like, so do you Google yourself? They're like, no. I was like, all right, I did. So with that, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this last real question before I get to some rapid fire questions for you. Tell me about the experience leading up to winning the 2022 Janet and Walter Sondheim Art Prize, and what's next?
That's good questions. I really was working on the Sondheim most of these last 2 months, really. I had made some work, but a lot of that work ended up going to LA, which was a show that literally just came down last week. But it was kind of, I would say, nerve-wracking. I think that's just a very straightforward and real answer. It was very nerve-wracking. I had to get, I think I decided, there's moments where Let me just say this. I have a lot of paintings that I've been sitting on mentally, like have sketched and thought through. And these are all things that I've been working out. And I really, from my curator kind of compartmental part of my brain, it was a moment where I'm like, okay, what works need to be there? And how do I tell a story within a story, or at least a bigger kind of like connection to these works? And so I sat down one day and said, okay, I'm going to make these 5 paintings to go alongside these 2 paintings that I already have. And knowing that I had to make those 5 paintings in 2 months was, like, again, nerve-wracking. But I have a very supportive family. And what was very fortunate for me, or not fortunate, I would say, one of the things that was very much kind of something that I try to always make sure I maintain is that I don't sacrifice my family. It makes no sense to talk about your family and then sacrifice your family at the same time. So I was also making sure that I was spending time with them and all that. So that's where it gets nerve-wracking. I was up until 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning doing a lot of this work. Wow. I have an assistant who just started, named Omar Harris, who used to be a student of mine in one of my classes. He had reached out to me and was like, hey, what's going on? And he was just like, hey, are you busy this summer? Because I need help making some of these platforms. I mean, basically the whole things have to be made. Like, there's a painting called God Doesn't Like Ugly. And that, just building that piece was about 3 months. Oh, wow. And it's not like on like steady, but it was just like having to figure things out and how to begin to, like, it's a 4-layer painting. So how do you make a 4-layer painting? And how do you begin to see these things kind of connect? And there's moments where I have to like step away from the painting and then go back to it. So all in all, it was a good experience. I was very fortunate to get everything done in time, and I feel like I overthink things, and so I'm always like, man, this is gonna work out, and it messes me up. But I didn't have the opportunity to overthink. It was like, you got 2 months, you're gonna have to knock this out. You don't think about it, you're just gonna make it work. Going into the Walters Art Museum for the first time, laying out the works, it felt good. It felt like I did my best. That's what I said. I remember thinking out loud in my mind, like, I did my best, and I walked away proud of myself. And so if I had not gotten into Sondheim, I would have been okay with that, because at some point I had shown myself that I put everything I could into it. And so I think the worst moment for me is when I don't do my best, and when I know there was a moment where I could have just pushed just a little bit harder. I think everything lined out perfectly, and to get the Sondheim was shocking. It hasn't really clicked yet, because I wasn't at the award ceremony because I had COVID. I literally was like coughing out my lungs as someone was texting, hey, congratulations. So it hasn't hit yet, but I do think that Megan and Maren are 2 amazing artists. It could have gone to any one of us. I'm very honored that I received it, but I knew it was a very difficult decision for the jurors. And so what do I do with this now? That's a good question. I have made lists of things I want to do with it. I had won the Joan Mitchell Award a long time ago when I was at MICA, the MFA Joan Mitchell Award. And I did a lot with that money, but I think I want to utilize this money smartly and begin to not just so much focus on what I can get out of it, but also figure out a way to, not get short-term benefits out of it, but some longer-term benefits out of it. And I think when I got to Joan Mitchell, I was thinking so short-term. It was like the housing market crash had happened. So, short-term was really just all I could think about. But now that I have kids, now that I'm like a lot older. There's things I want to look in. How can this be an investment and not so much a spend, something I spend. This whole ride, it's been 6 months. It's been 6 months doing the Sondheim. We've been doing this thing since February. And so, it just feels weird that it's done. It feels weird that I received it, and it feels weird, even just having conversations on the podcast with you, or getting, people reaching out to me. I'm a very introverted person. I chill. I'm in my studio making the work, whether someone's looking at it or not looking at it, and I'm very fortunate that people have seen it. But this is all just like, is this what's going on?
Yeah,
and
it was when it was announced, or when it was in that area, just the vibe that was in there. It was so many people were happy. It was like I was next to the homie Chris Batten, and it was just like fist bumps.
Yeah, Chris.
And it was great. And that's the first time I actually have gone to it or what have you, because I've been covering arts and culture or what have you for the last few years, and you're the third winner I've had on, so it's just like I'm out here, it was great to see that. And and I think that's why I emailed you a few minutes, like, congratulations, bro.
Yeah, you did. I mean, I think it was like, it was I had a student, or I have a student who reached out to me and was like, congratulations on getting it. He says, I don't want to say what he all said. There was a lot of things he said, but basically he was saying not only was it something that he was proud of, but he was saying that you're a trailblazer for me, right? And I think I've never imagined myself to be in that situation, to be a trailblazer for someone. And I think I got a lot of messages, but that kind of sits in my mind, just his message a lot, because I think you don't realize how many people are watching you, and you don't realize how many people are trying to figure out how to do this thing. But to see other people do it can give you some encouragement. And that's how I got here. I saw people do it, and it's what made me apply. It was what made me do the work that I do. I watch other people succeed. Yeah. And now, before I know it, I have one of my students saying very much the same thing to me. That in itself is a full circle that, I am truly honored to be part of and see. I've had mentors and people who I would not be here without them. And I remember one mentor, before he passed away, he saw one of my solo shows. And I said, I'm here because of you. Thank you so much. And he said, no. I don't want to thank you. I just want you to pass it on. Yeah. And so I just feel, to answer your question, I feel like just getting that message from that student and from many other people just makes me feel like I'm somewhat. It's bigger than what I'm receiving. I'm receiving money. I'm receiving this kind of waves of people really excited. But I also think that it just, because of this community, this Baltimore art community that we're in, when we are succeeding, we kind of succeed together. I know it sounds really kind of corny to say that. I know, the reality is some people might not feel that way, but I do think I watched Cindy Chang, get this award. I've seen Tony Shore and other people get this award. And because I've seen them get it, I'm like, I'm going to try too. Yeah. And I'm waiting for that student who reached out to me to apply for this, and hopefully he'll get it. And I'll be able to kind of say the same thing, like, congratulations, dude. I'm super proud of you. So anyways, very, very humble, very honored.
Well, thank you. And I think that's a good space for us to stop off at on the real questions. I want to hit you over the head real quick with 5 rapid fire questions. Don't overthink them, because I do the same thing. We're on the same page, bro. I'm telling you, we're on the same page. So, first one I want to hit you with is, if your artwork were music, what would it sound like? What would be the genre?
Quelle Chris. And I think Quelle Chris, I don't know how to describe, he's hip hop, but he's like an underground hip hop artist. So yeah, I would say Quelle Chris and very much like the rappers from like Detroit and like kind of like New York right now, like Quelle Chris and Pink Seafood, like those type of dudes. Yeah. You know, yeah, that's what I would say it sounds like.
So next two are pop culture related, so be prepared. What's a movie that's begging to be remade?
I hope none.
That's great.
I think we're so done with remakes. I'm so done.
I think we're done with this.
We're so done. Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna set this one up for you. It's Saturday morning.
I got one. I want a Black Goonies.
Okay. I'm here for that. Yeah. I'm here for it. I mean, I can play like Sloth Old Hat. Nah, that's terrible. That's terrible.
Like a Goonies that's made more urban than like Goonies and what I believe was like Maine or something like that. Like, I want to see like a Black Goonies.
One could argue that Boys in the Hood was the first half of Boys in the Hood. Is
that's probably true. That's probably true. You probably already got one. Yeah.
Not gold. It's just like drugs. You know, whatever. I don't know. All right. So it's Saturday morning in the early 90s. What are you watching?
Okay, so I get my like week cartoons mixed up with my Saturday cartoons.
It's a thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Shoot. It's probably Nickelodeon.
Ooh.
Probably either like, is it Rocco? No, Rocco wasn't like a week Saturday thing. Oh, you know what? It was like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was on Saturday, if I remember correctly. So yeah, probably like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm talking about like the old one. Probably them. Yeah. Probably something like that. But I do remember like weekdays it was like Disney. You gotta watch like the DuckTales, Tailspin, Darkwing Duck, the Chip and Dale, all that stuff.
I'm here for it.
Yeah. Toxic Avenger was another one. Yeah.
I was definitely X-Men on the weekends for me.
Oh, X-Men. I forgot about that one. Yeah, X-Men was definitely up there.
All right. Let's see. I got two more for you. Are you more of a thinker or a doer?
Oh, my wife would say I'm a thinker. I actually should say I'm both, but I like thinking a lot. I think I get too deep, but it depends on what we're talking about. Yeah.
Okay. And lastly, regardless to language conventions, right? Is art a noun or a verb?
There's my thinking going right now. I would say, for me, art is it's both. It's definitely both. But I do think that art is a verb.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's legit. So that's pretty much all I have for today. So I want to thank you for coming onto this podcast, and I want to invite and encourage you to tell fine folks where to check you out, to check out your work, website, social media, all of that good stuff.
Instagram is my account. I'm sorry, I have my dog running around. Instagram is J double hand for the W. There's an underscore in between J underscore between double hand as one word, and for the is a grouping of words. And then as far as my website, James Williams. 2 eyes for the second.com. And it's a really amazing website. And I say that because my friend Tommy Dahlberg made this website in the way that I wanted it to be. And it's amazing. I love it.
I'm a big fan of the website, by the way.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you.
So there you have it, folks. For James Williams II, I am Rob Lee, saying that there's art and culture and winners on this podcast. And you just got to look for it.